Hi, welcome to this episode of our Transfer Travel podcast. I'm joined today by Dan Christian, founder and host of the very successful Travel Trends podcast, and we're here today to be talking about the role of podcasting in 2025 and other major marketing trends that we can expect to see in the upcoming year. So, podcasting itself is a massive thing. I didn't realise how big it was until we'd started ourselves. So in 2023, there were 464.7 million podcast listeners worldwide, and that only increased in 2024 to 504.9 million podcast listeners. So we can see where the trend's going. We've got an expert on hand to help give some advice. So keep listening and we'll go from there.
But yeah, just in terms of background, many of our listeners are familiar with my story, but I've spent about 20 years in the travel industry working with companies like Lonely Planet, G Adventures, and I spent the last near decade with a company called the Travel Corporation, which is one of the world's largest privately owned group of travel companies. There's about 40 different brands, Trafalgar, Contiki, Insight. And I was living in LA, and I was my focus was on getting the business on the other side of the pandemic and preparing for business to come back. And so I was running an internal team called Acceleration Team, but unfortunately my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and one of the things I struggled with was trying to figure out if, it was a big decision for me, but obviously the right one, was to step out of my corporate role to take care of him. And he didn't want me to, so he was adamant, and he was far too optimistic. There'll be other summers. He was given 6 months, he had 5. I stepped out of my role basically a month before he went into the hospital. And so looking back, I'm so glad I made the decision when I did to get that time with him. But my commitment to him was that actually I was going to stay connected to the community by creating a podcast. And so I literally did 10 episodes in the first season. I focused on speaking to some of the most amazing colleagues that I've worked with to discuss how they navigated the pandemic and what business looked like on the other side. And I thought those conversations would be interesting to a wider audience. And sure enough, it took off in season 1, and I think we had listeners in about 40 or 50 countries. And then we did season 2, and we had a lot of high profile guests that joined us on season 2 from the media space, and people like Paul English from Kayak, and some really fascinating people. And then season 3, all of a sudden we had sponsorship, and we had a lot of interest, getting 1 or 2 requests a day to be on the show. And we actually started doing more panel-based discussions because we had so many guests that were interested in participating. And what we actually discovered when we did these episodes, this was a breakthrough moment for us, and learnings for you and other people that are interested in podcasting. But essentially what we did was we came up with the most compelling topics with the right guests to speak to them. And those episodes got way more downloads than just having a particular high-profile individual. And we realized that there was something more to that concept. So in season 4, which we launched kind of mid-2024, we had 4 sponsors, and we sold sponsors on our themes. And we came up with 5 themes. So we do a 4-episode deep dive into a specific topic, like the cruise industry or adventure or travel advisors. And we saw our audience grow and grow. So now we have listeners in 125 countries, and we've become the most popular B2B travel podcast globally, which I say my heart grew 2 sizes when I was at World Travel Market, where I saw you and obviously did my presentation, because it was amazing to see that there was, unfortunately there was a couple hundred people that couldn't get into the session, but there were so many people that, that had been guests on the show, that were listeners on the show. And for me, I guess that was in real life validation of the journey we've been on, and the fact that so many people listen to and enjoy our show and get benefit from it, which for me is a dream come true in many ways.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dan. So as your podcast has reached over 50 countries and, is growing, how do you find the time to, connect with your audience and make meaningful connections with them? And do you feel like that influences the next steps in your podcast, or what do we do?
What's really interesting is we attended a lot of events in 2024, and we've deepened our partnerships in 2025. So there's about 10 or 12 events that we are attending, in addition to World Travel Market, like ITB, Focusrite, Forbes Travel Guide, so many events. And what we actually find is that many of our listeners to our show are keen to meet us when we're there. So that's why we're recording podcasts. And then we've been doing this thing, which was kind of new for me. It was we're doing kind of meetups to connect people who are avid listeners to our show, so that they can get a chance to meet me and meet other listeners to our show. So after the World Travel Market, we had a gathering that night, and it was amazing. We actually organized our own event first, interestingly enough. Back February last year, we created an online event for the travel industry to wrap their head around how artificial intelligence was going to impact our industry. And so we had about 1,500 people attend to be a part of that event. And that was our first foray into events, and it was incredibly successful. We've this year, we're actually planning to do our next event in person in Washington as part of a Rivals event. And so we're going to do a 1-day look at AI's impact on multi-day and day tour travel. And so we're bringing our events to real life. But yeah, where I was going with that was just that the number of events that we go to now, we host meetups while we're there for our listeners of our show, which is, I always find it, I really enjoy meeting people that enjoy listening to the show, because I think no matter what, like, you develop a personal connection with the host, and I genuinely enjoy that I've had such an impact in some way that I hear people come to me and say, you know, I've gotten so many opportunities after being a guest on your show, or that I learned something from your show I was able to apply. And that, to me, when I think about my younger self, like 20 years ago, and yes, podcasts are that old. If you look back on the history, they went, 2004, 2005 is when 2005 was when podcast became the word of the year. And so, and at that time I was working at Lonely Planet, living in Australia, and riding my bike to work, and I was listening to podcasts, and I was applying the lessons I was learning from those conversations to my role and with my team. So I saw the immediate benefit, and that's who I keep in mind all the time when I'm asking questions and trying to dive into a specific topic with a guest, is I'm trying to think about what are the things I would like to know that would be valuable. What would I want to ask them if I'm working on a major project at work, or trying to get a major initiative live, or launching a new brand, and try and listen to the stories of people that have done it successfully, and get their advice and guidance. So yeah, for me, I always have, I guess, my younger self in mind when I'm recording and asking these questions, which clearly it would seem as though it resonates, because more and more listeners are not only engaging with us and our audience is expanding, but the one thing I genuinely love, I get text messages, I get Instagram messages, and people actually have follow-up questions, and which means that they're genuinely engaged. And this was, I guess, the big realization for us, Molly, with our podcast, is that with long-form podcasting, which I love the medium myself, so I was a fan of it before I started this podcast, but what I discovered that I didn't realize at the time was that when it comes to podcasts, is that people listen longer, they retain more information, and they take action. And those are all things that you want as an advertiser to connect with a specific community. And so even though the audience may not be as large as other channels, podcasters are really high value audience that, that do take action.
Yeah, I really liked how you referenced your younger self, because it can be quite an intimidating industry to come into. And obviously, I know you've been doing this for a while, not necessarily travel, like there was marketing as well, but it's still nice to keep in the back of your mind someone who is just starting off, and it makes it a lot more attainable for them to listen to, and for them to grow as well. So I do really like that. But in terms of how you would work with other businesses, and the relationships you build there, is there anything that you do, or would you recommend it to other businesses again to create the podcast like we're doing, or what have you found?
So we actually created a Friends of Travel Trends, which we need to add Transfer Travel to on our website, to promote all the other travel podcasts that are out there, so that actually people take more interest in this overall category. And we're certainly finding that more and more companies are either just starting to advertise on podcasts because they've realized that there is, that people prefer ads and podcasts over any other type of medium. 45% of listeners are more likely to visit an advertiser's website after hearing an ad on a podcast. 46% of US listeners have purchased an ad related to the product. And, this was a $2 billion industry in 23, and here we are in 25.
Yes, absolutely. Please add us to that Friends of Travel Trends page. We will be very happy with that. Thank you. So moving on, I guess with so many platforms competing for attention, how do you find podcasting staying relevant? In this, you've obviously seen it grow over the past few years. So what's your take on that? How would you find it?
Well, it's really interesting because you mentioned my background being marketing and digital marketing. So a lot of my background is performance marketing and trying to drive ROI for travel brands. So trying to get a customer to book and seeing the value of that transaction, and trying to build out more marketing budget and a bigger team to optimize against. And so for me, marketing and performance marketing is my background, whereas podcasting to me is much more like radio. Like it's what's old is new again. But what's interesting is that when you have so many different ways to try and reach a customer today, I did this interesting battle of the media last year in London. It was at a cruise conference, a cruise summit, and I had to basically pitch the audience based on podcasting compared to email, compared to social, compared to paid search, compared to radio, interestingly enough, display marketing. And I think that we certainly, the crowd didn't even see podcasts coming. We were added as a last minute addition to kind of throw into the mix. And I could say the cruise audience was all of a sudden made aware of this massive opportunity around podcasting that they weren't aware of. And that's part of the reason we did a podcast. And so we came second in that. I think we narrowly came just behind social, which makes sense for all the obvious reasons. Some of the interesting stats I was sharing with you is part of what I built into my presentation, that and it very much is that in this world where you have so many distractions, if you it's almost written on our DNA. We are here because we've listened to other people's stories over time, and people's stories provide us as a species shortcuts. It's a faster way to get to where you're going if you can. And this is very much why traveler reviews are a great example. Like companies like TripAdvisor, is that humans are wired to take shortcuts. And so, like, even dining restaurant recommendations, because we all have a limited amount of time and money, and we want to get the most out of every experience. So we're always looking for peer reviews, and we're looking. And so I guess that's where listening to someone on a podcast, where you can multitask. You can be doing the dishes, you could be on the treadmill, you can be driving, and so you can fill that time with learning. And so yeah, so I definitely see it as one of the most important forms of marketing in 2025. And I think, if anything, not to get into politics, we certainly saw just in the recent U.S. election the power and importance of podcasts. And this is where, like, there is a disruption happening to traditional media.
So from your own experience with podcasting, do you think that you've had, the right approach to it? Obviously you have, because you've got, all these fantastic sponsors and the listeners that are increasing daily. But is there anything that you'd change, I guess, or are you happy with the way it's gone?
Well, it's interesting because we started with audio for the very reason that we wanted it to be someone, like, almost eavesdropping on a conversation between two industry executives that are talking about the state of the industry, that they could get valuable learnings and insights from. And so our focus was on the audio and creating great a listing opportunity for people to overhear a conversation. And I guess that was sort of our angle and approach when we first got the podcast started. And it's clearly evolved and grown from there. However, that part remains true. Like, that is core to me. Is I want to be able to listen to it back and listen to the answers and make sure that that it was a valuable, constructive conversation. That it was enjoyable. Like, obviously, we're trying to add humor and make it fun and interesting and entertaining as well. But at the same time, I want to make sure that it's impactful. And it's like, that you get someone that's going to share some profound ideas, or to help inspire you, or to help, not only for people to rise up in the industry. That's sort of one of my ambitions, for people to listen to the show, because, like me, 20 years ago, I was looking to rise up in the industry, and I was taking practical advice from other people to figure out how best to do that. So if that's an objective for listening to the show, great. If you are trying to build up a startup, or even take an established business and reinvent it, you can hear from various people and hear their stories. And so quite a few people, this is where, they've been on the show, and then their network just dramatically expands, because lots of people want to then speak to them or engage with them or learn more about them. And that delights me to no end, to continuously hear that from other people. So it's an exciting time to be in the podcast space. And I think if anything, we were just right on time. I don't think that we were necessarily early. I think literally our show just seemed to arrive at the right time for our industry as it was coming back, and that people wanted to hear these other stories, because it is exciting to hear our industry doing well, and not and on the other side of lockdown. So we hardly talk about the pandemic anymore, but it is interesting to see still just what traveler behavior, what's changed, and how people have been impacted. No matter what, it had impact on all of our lives, and we're still living that out. We're still playing that out. So even though the revenge travel is over, the fact that travel was taken away for a period of time has made so many people committed to traveling as much as possible for as long as possible, because they never want to get to be taken away from them again.
So last year, when we attended World Travel Market, along with a lot of other people, we watched you on the stage discussing digital marketing trends, which was so insightful, and it was really enjoyable as well. But out of all the trends that you put forward, what do you think we'll see an increase of in 2025, or what do you think that businesses should make a main priority? So just a reminder, there was social media is the new SEO, hyper-personalization with AI, podcasts becoming mainstream, short-form video, purpose-driven marketing, and community engagement as well.
Purpose-driven marketing and community-based travel was another big theme. But I would say for my two would be, like, the social media is the new SEO was definitely, and then the short form videos. I mean, we just saw what happened when TikTok was about to go dark in the US, and it was saved again. And we have TikTok on our Travel Trends episode this week as we're focusing on influencers. And if you look at the outsized impact TikTok has had by virtue of creating really, or giving the tools to create these short form videos, it's why YouTube has, shifted to YouTube Shorts. It's why Instagram has introduced Reels. It's shifted the game for all the other social media players. And the reality is that, if it's that whole thing about attention spans now. Like, people are not going to watch. They'll listen, but they're not. But if you can have a really impactful short form video, it can be a game changer for your brand. So many come. So I would say, literally, if you were asking me as a marketer for advice, I mean, sure, yes, participate in podcasts, start a podcast, but that needs to be like third or fourth. It's in the top 5. But I would say absolutely short form videos. And the beauty of podcasting now is that you can create, like, from this conversation, and even with our show, we basically use a platform called Opus Clip, and that's why you're going to see these clips on the social channels.
I guess referencing the hyper-personalization with AI, would you say that AI has a role in podcasting, or what is your opinion on that as a whole?
Well, my biggest concern with AI and podcasting is the rise of auto-generated podcasts that people, and it's the same that applies to email as well, since you have this idea of a co-pilot, is that who's going to read email anymore if it's AI drafting it and AI reading it? And so that's one I find generally disconcerting, because you can tell if something's been written, using words like delve. Like, there are some things that will identify to you this has been drafted by AI, and that takes away any personalization. So email is one aspect, but my son is an avid. He actually creates, for his studies, he creates podcasts and listens to the podcasts. And it's a brilliant way for him to be able to learn. So he uploads the presentations, and it creates a podcast as a conversation between two people. And so then he listens to the podcast to basically do his studying. So that's a brilliant execution of that. My biggest concern, though, is that if you and I weren't real, like, part of the reason that people love podcasting is because it's the human touch and the human connection. And so as soon as there are podcasts out there that are AI generated, or and that's the part that I guess freaks me out, is that it's becoming that much more difficult to differentiate from what's real and what is AI generated.
Do you believe that podcasts are just more accessible for people, and that's probably why they are more, enjoyable and attainable? I guess, like, they are more accessible to people, and that's why there is the reaction that there has been to them, as we were saying earlier, like the increase, and it's just going to grow and grow. Do you think that that's why, or?
No, it's the ultimate storytelling, which is why I love what you guys are doing, because not only do they get to meet you, so it's one thing, like the fact that we got to know each other. We met at the travel technology show earlier last year. We kept in touch. We saw each other at the World Travel Market. Obviously, we generally get along. You kindly invited me to be on the show, and you're actioning this. You've created your own podcast, and so what I would say is that those things that were happening in real life, you found a way to replicate them so that people actually do feel more of a kinship and connected to you and the team, and see that dynamic. And the main thing, the takeaway from when I've seen the three of you, like, these are people I want to work with. These are people I want to collaborate with. They're not only real, but they're some of the things you're talking about are genuinely interesting. Like, you want to jump into the conversation. So, and the way you guys are sitting around on couches and looking comfortable and cutting back and forth, I was like, yeah, this has got a good feel to it. And I think you will grow your audience. But it's interesting. There's no question you're going to grow your audience, but you're going to grow your audience around the Transfer Travel brand, which is exactly what you want. They'll get to know you. They'll get to know more about the business. And you just can't pay for that type of advertising in other forms of media. So it is truly owned content that you'll get more exposure for. And so I think we'll see companies that will struggle with it. And the main thing is that people just don't put enough time, attention, and I've seen people struggle with podcasts when they're not truly committed to it. They're doing it once in a while. It doesn't have a regular release schedule, and so audience get frustrated. So the big things that we learn, like, we release new episodes every Wednesday, and the audience comes to expect that. And I can tell you, if I'm slightly late hitting publish, I hear about it. I was just like, you didn't make the deadline. Like, I was ready to go for my walk, and I checked it, and it wasn't there.
From your opinion, travel trends. What do you think are, like, the upcoming travel trends that we can expect to see in 2025? Because I was looking at them, and it was like long haul holidays, winter break. Sustainability was a big one, but I don't necessarily think that will be a trend. I think that's here to stay. So it'd be interesting to know your opinion on it.
The topic of our show is travel trends, and clearly I get asked quite often about travel trends, and I read up on all the different trends. And there's several that I found fascinating going into 2025 that I thought I'd just share with you. That it also highlights when trends. One thing about naked flying. I don't know if you saw this trend of naked flying, which is not as it stands, as it sounds. The whole idea of naked flying is literally you get on a flight without any bags, any technology, and you just go where you're going and have the freedom and flexibility without having luggage or a backpack or anything to take with you. So this idea of like naked flying, just like you'd get on a bus or like, and which I don't see being super practical for many reasons, but it sounds like a thrilling idea just to be able to get on a plane with your passport and go somewhere. So naked flying is, but this is where like some of these things they grab headlines and this is not a meaningful trend. But I'll share a couple of these with you because they really made me laugh. It was like, so the other one is Herkel-Durkel. I don't know if you know the trend of Herkel-Durkling. People are spending, it's I guess a German term, but about staying in bed all day. But essentially, people are staying in hotels and they're staying in their bed and working from their bed, so they order room service. So literally, hotels are adjusting now to traveler behavior to try and create the right setup for someone who's going to Herkel-Durkel at their hotel. And then the other one that also made me laugh was cowboy travel, given all of these trends of like Yellowstone. And I mean, the US is always a top, that people just want to travel and have some association with cowboys. It's like cowboy travel is a big thing for 2025, which like like Westerns have been a thing for a long time. But those are three that I call out that it's like, those are not, I would say those are not the big trends. It's worth being aware of. But yeah, back to your question though, with where I do see the big opportunity for this year, I genuinely think that personalization is very much more achievable in 2025 with technology. So like, what can I know about you that I can personalize the next offer to you? And I just think this is where AI has given us a superpower to be able to take a lot of data and then try and figure out a way to make it meaningful and relevant. And you can do that more on a one-to-one level with a customer if you can leverage not having an analyst go back through stats. I mean, this is some of the things we used to do. Part of my role at the Travel Corporation was this idea of the 10-year wallets. How do we keep people traveling within our brands over the course of 10 years? Because they're not necessarily going to take a guided tour every year, but they might take a river cruise one year, a safari the next year. So how do we make sure that all of our brands remain relevant? Well, we were looking at past travel behavior and then trying to figure out what destination to recommend or what new brand to recommend to someone in that audience. And we had data and we had an analyst, but now with AI, like that it changes everything because you can navigate this so more quickly. So it is one of the things that, hyper personalization with AI was one of my big marketing trends. And I think that in terms of an overall travel trend, people are looking for personalization. And I'll give you an exact example of that. As we had all of these AI itinerary tools rolled out, and people, it's nearly 50% of people now are using AI to help plan their next trip. And this is a big deal because not only are you empowering customers to create their own itineraries, but they're also, the itineraries they're creating, is your brand showing up or relevant? So this concept of SEO was so vital to our industry, and now it's important to be indexed on these large language models and to make sure your brands are relevant in that space. So like, especially given that travelers are using it, but the challenge around just creating a generic itinerary, just 5 days to Barcelona, is that that's for anybody's 5 days in Barcelona. It's not based on how much they actually know about your past, you're a family traveler, you're a luxury traveler. And I think that's where, if I think of one of the biggest trends for this year, is that the companies that really leverage personalization well to better put offers and incentives in front of customers, they're going to win this year, and they're going to be that much better poised for success going forward to increase their open rates, their conversion rates, all of those things. So it's not a, and then the other thing, as far as overall travel trends, the thing that I'm paying most attention to, it's not necessarily the luxury versus, this guided, group-based travel. Like there's a lot of sustainability, like all of these things are important, but I think the one thing that we're seeing this year is emerging destinations. And this is where once travelers have all the technology and the tools and airfares going to multiple places, and we're in 2025, people saw what happened when travel came back, to use, the revenge travel. I never liked that term, but people rushed back to Italy. It was overheated and overcrowded, and they tried to do these trips. And then next thing you know, people were rushing off this last year. They were going to Japan, they were going to Scandinavia, because they were chasing cool destinations. Cool as in the climate change. And so But so you can see human behavior taking hold where they've rushed back to a destination, then they're rushing to other destinations, and one of the big themes for this year is emerging destinations. So places like Colombia, places like Albania, even like the Philippines. This concept of destination dupes, where people are highlighting these amazing places you can go and see that look very similar to a beautiful place you may be familiar with, but without the crowds, without the cost. And Colombia is one of those destinations that I was just there a few months ago, and we're going to do a special spotlight on Colombia because Colombia is safe. Like, I've traveled to most countries in South America and Central America. I hadn't been to Colombia yet. And Colombia was extraordinary. It was beautiful. The people were wonderful. The food was amazing. And the cost, like, literally, it's like 20% of the price you would pay in the UK or USA or Canada. And the value for money is incredible. And so there's a window of opportunity when a place like that sort of becomes accessible and on the grid. And I know it'll be totally different. Like, we were in Cartagena, they're building a Four Seasons there, but it won't be ready for a couple of years. But you can see the changes happening, and you know that destination will be very different 5 years from now. So if I was to say to anybody, where would you go this year? Go to Colombia. Go and see Colombia. It's like, and so the big trend I'm looking at is emerging destinations. So we're gonna start doing like a monthly spotlight to highlight these emerging destinations. And Albania is another one. Like, if you look at, you're in Europe, but all the Americans are in Croatia because they've seen Game of Thrones and they want to go to Croatia. And it is beautiful, but it's expensive, and it's packed. And so where are the Europeans right now? They're all in Albania because they're doing hikes. It's so affordable, so beautiful. And all of a sudden, Albania will be on the map for American travelers going into next year. So I think the emerging destination theme, like tracking what destinations are all of a sudden, I'm sure you've heard everyone talking about going to Japan. I still hear people going to Japan. Like, they had a record year last year, and they'll continue that this year, and that's great. Japan's an amazing destination. But you start to pick up on people saying new destinations that you're like, wait a second, there's something happening here. There's enough people mentioning this that, like, there's something's going on.
Dan, thank you so much. It's been an honour, as always. I've loved it. I've loved picking your brain, loved talking to you, and we'll hopefully see you soon. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks. Bye.
Oh, thank you, Molly. And thank you for the opportunity. Anyone wants to check it out, traveltrendspodcast.com. You can sign up for our monthly newsletter, check out our social channels, YouTube and Instagram in particular, at Travel Trends Podcast. And then Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, Travel Trends with Dan Christian. By all means, subscribe and send me feedback. I'd love to hear from you, and reach out if you're interested in being on the show. And Molly, obviously, it'd be great to have you on. I look forward to speaking to the whole team and seeing you in person throughout the year. So good luck with your podcast. I wish you and the team every success.